So the PS5 launches right around the corner, and that is super, super exciting because every time there's a new console generation, obviously it's very cool to see all of the new technologies and of course all of the new games that come along with that, but you also have a lot of accessories to buy in a lot of cases, and that's one thing I think is almost kind of a hidden cost when it comes to a new console coming out, and something a lot of people forget to think about amidst all of the hype building up to all the amazing games that get launched around the launch window. So I already did a video talking about the games that I'm most excited for the PlayStation 5, but today what I want to do is just run through some of the accessories that are going to be available at the launch of the new system, and kind of break it down into different categories, specifically must-haves, nice-to-haves, and stuff that you probably don't need at launch, if at all. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and dive into what I feel are some of the must-have accessories for the PlayStation 5, and the first thing I think that's an absolute necessity is additional storage. I think additional storage is going to be an absolute must for a couple of reasons. One, games are going to be much bigger next generation, and two, the PlayStation 5's internal drive with its 1TB of storage is really going to be more about 600 gigabytes worth of storage, so you're already kind of operating at a disadvantage here. Now, whenever I made the Next Gen Confusion video a few weeks ago talking about some of the things that I thought were a little bit confusing about this new console generation starting, one of the things that I pointed out was that as of the time of that recording, we really didn't have any expandable storage options that were available to purchase yet, and they haven't really been outlined. However, since then, there has been at least one that has manifested, so in the same way that Xbox Series X has those 1TB expansion cards, Sony has confirmed at least one drive from Western Digital that will be compatible with the PlayStation 5. However, like the Series X, it's also going to be pretty pricey at around $230 for 1TB. Considering that is pretty pricey to upgrade your PS5 storage, there are some other options you can go through which are cheaper, albeit slightly less convenient. And what I mean by that is, you can buy just a regular external SSD or an external regular conventional hard drive, and then use that to store PS5 games. You can't play them from that external drive because it won't be rated for the speed necessary to actually play the game. However, what you can do is swap games that are stored on that external drive into the internal 600 gigabytes of usable space you'll have on the PlayStation 5's native SSD drive. It's a little bit more cumbersome, but it's definitely a cheaper option than shelling out $220 to get that, dedicated 1TB SSD that Sony has approved. Now, if you want to strike a nice balance between price and performance to do it this way, one of the drives that I've used that I can personally vouch for is the Samsung T7, which is incredibly fast. Again, not fast enough that you would be able to play PS5 games natively from it while it's connected externally, but certainly fast enough that swapping games in and out from external storage to the internal storage so you can play them would be pretty quick compared to something like a slower conventional hard drive. And remember, the PlayStation 5 is backwards compatible with the bulk of PS4 games, so if you want to load that external drive up with a ton of PS4 games that you've downloaded, or if you've still got stuff in your collection that you want to install to that external drive, it will be able to play those. Plus, with PlayStation Plus Collection being available at launch on the PlayStation 5, there will be a ton of amazing games that represent some of the best offerings from the PlayStation 4 generation, available for you to download immediately and crack into, just in case there is a drought during the launch window of the PlayStation 5 and pickings are kinda slim for next generation games in that first couple of months. My next must-have is much cheaper than buying SSD storage, and that would be just to have solid USB-C charging cables. This is something I think gets overlooked a lot, and I personally overlooked it for a very long time and constantly struggled with charging cables that were long enough, but then they were also just made of, your standard rubber or plastic, and they would get really tangled and knotted very easily, and it's just a huge pain. Now, I did eventually step up to a beefier, more capable braided cable, and you can find these included with really premium high-end controllers like the Xbox Elite controller. However, even though that came with a 9-foot braided cable that's absolutely great, it's also a $180 investment. However, you can totally buy high-quality braided USB-C cables for charging and playing that are definitely long enough to reach from your TV to your couch for about $14.99. And year after year, the ones I consistently recommend are still Anker's red braided USB-C cables. Long story short, they're affordable, they're reliable, they look great, and they don't get tangled because they use nylon for the cable body as opposed to PVC or plastic. And I just can't say enough good things about Anker's braided cables because I've used them for everything from charging production equipment to making sure that my Nintendo Switch Pro controller stays charged whenever I'm playing and I'm streaming. They're just a really solid product, they're consistently affordable, and I think that red is a really striking color to boot. Now let's move on to some nice-to-have accessories, and I think the obvious segue if we're going to talk about charging cables is an extra DualSense controller. In my opinion, this is a nice-to-have, but not a must-have. Now, depending on your situation, it might be a must-have, right? If you do a ton of couch co-op with friends or family, it might be just, a non-starter for you. You just have to have a second controller. If that's the case, absolutely go buy one. Clearly, it's a must-have for you. However, if you're not in that camp, I would recommend holding off on a DualSense, and that's for a couple of reasons. And my first reason is the DualSense is an entirely new controller. But you know what else was an entirely new controller? The Switch Joy-Cons, and almost 4 years later, we're still seeing issues with drift from the left Joy-Cons. Now, I'm not saying the DualSense 5 is inherently going to have the same issues as the Joy-Cons, it probably won't. But nonetheless, this is still an entirely new product, and it hasn't really spent any time exposed to the wild yet, so it's not outside the realm of possibility that there are still some issues or kinks that will have to be worked out for it, and if that's the case, it probably makes sense to hold off on a second controller unless you absolutely need it. And the second reason I think it makes sense to hold off for now is because obviously, inevitably, we're going to get better versions of that controller as time goes on. It's going to be offered in different designs or different colors, and they may even do a premium version just like they did with the Scuff Vantage during the PlayStation 4 era, where, you know, they add even enhanced functionality from a first-party offering. Or a licensed third-party offering, I should say. Also, side note, I really hope we at least get a back button attachment for the DualSense at some point in the future, because the one for the DualShock 4 was excellent. So yeah, I would say having a second DualSense at the ready isn't necessarily a must-have, unless you just really hate the idea of playing tethered if you did forget to charge one of your controllers. And if that's the case and you absolutely love to have a second controller on standby, that kind of brings me to my next nice-to-have, and that would be the DualSense charging station. The only reason this is a nice-to-have as far as I'm concerned is, yes, it's convenient to just drop a controller into a stand, and secondarily because its aesthetics definitely match the look of the PlayStation 5 proper. However, if there aren't already, there will certainly be a range of third-party charging stations, or charging docks, or charging stands that manifest after the PlayStation 5's launch, and at least a few of those will probably have better features than the first-party offerings. So yeah, it's nice and perfectly functional, but not really a must-have considering you could always charge your controller with a USB cable that you have lying around. But before we get too far from maintaining first-party aesthetics, I would say the next nice-to-have is the Sony 3D Pulse wireless headset. Now, I'm split on this for a few reasons, because historically, I really liked first-party headsets, but I'm curious how this one's going to perform. Yes, it has 3D audio, and that's supposed to be much more immersive than standard surround sound, and Sony's been hitting the immersive audio feature pretty hard in its marketing. But absent any true reviews, it's hard to say if this thing's gonna be worth $100. However, I have a suspicion with how much Sony's been touting the 3D audio feature that it's going to be a pretty solid offering. 12-hour battery life and also adopting USB-C charging with an aesthetic that perfectly matches the console, it definitely looks like it's going to be a worthy headset. And if you've already got a headset that you absolutely love and it's got a 3.5mm connection, then you might be able to safely pass on this. But if you've got a more nuanced ear and 3D audio is super important to you, or if you just really like the immersion and the discretion of just playing with headphones on, then it might be a different story entirely. That's why I think you could probably swing both ways on this one, depending on your predilection towards the crispest audio experience that you can get out of the next generation PS5. Now let's talk about the last two accessories that I'm pretty sure you can safely pass on whoever you are, and those would be the Sony HD camera and the media remote. And that's because Sony already said your old camera from the PS4 is still going to work with the PlayStation VR thanks to an included adapter with the PS5, and there's no word yet as to whether or not this camera will actually improve tracking or offer any significant advantages over its predecessor if you want to play VR on the PS5. Now, it's possible they might make an announcement that explains as much, but right now we don't have any reason to believe that it will, so unless you lean really, really hard on your PlayStation camera, you can probably pass on this for now. And as for the media remote, I never really saw the appeal of media remotes. Maybe the form factor holds some appeal over a conventional controller for some people, but for me, it just never really seemed like a necessity, because even if somebody just gave me one, I'm pretty sure I would still reach for the DualSense over a media remote if I had to interact with my PlayStation 5 at all. I don't know, maybe this one should have actually been in the nice-to-have category, but ultimately, I never saw the appeal, and yeah, I just don't think they're that necessary. Alright, so that's it for this video. Again, I just wanted to run through the PlayStation 5 accessories that were going to be on offer at launch, and kind of talk about my thoughts on which ones I thought were most important versus the ones that were least important. But hey, what about you? Are you getting a PlayStation 5 at launch? If so, what accessories are you looking out for? I have not explored a lot of the third-party offerings, so if you have any suggestions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll be linking a lot of these below where you can go pick them up on Amazon if you are trying to grab some for launch day. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you're new here and you dig the content, maybe hit the subscribe button. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.